Let me speak to the genius that is John Carpenter's Escape from LA. How ahead of his time was he with this movie? Think about it. We live in a time of constant remakes and reboots, with television and movies constantly trying to revive old media, either in name or in concept, but entirely based on nostalgic callback. In the last 10 years alone, we've had movies based on everything from old comic books to old TV shows. Movies like Miami Vice, Chips, Baywatch, 21 Jump Street, and more, and old cartoons like G.I. Joe and the Transformers. Every year we are inundated with movies wholly unoriginal in concept. So much so that we are afraid to break into any new original territory in filmmaking for fear of not being accepted into the film geek rock and roll grunge tip. So, let me speak to the genius that is John Carpenter's Escape from LA. Escape from LA was Carpenter's sequel to his underground cult hit, Escape from New York. Carpenter has always been a filmmaker ahead of his time, with Escape from New York not doing great at the box office, but only gaining in popularity on cable and home video later. The rest of his Kurt Russell team-ups follow the same pattern. The Thing failed at the box office thanks to E.T., but is now hailed as one of the great horror films of all time, ranking up there with The Exorcist. Big Trouble in Little China also failed at the box office, but has since gained a hearty following thanks to its insouciant attitude towards the action genre. It is Carpenter's honoring of the martial arts genre that is balanced with great characters, great comedy, and a great twist on leading man action heroes. In 1996, there are altogether a dozen or so comic book movies, reboots, sequels, and remakes, including Escape from LA. And aside from Star Trek First Contact, Mission Impossible, a very Brady sequel, maybe Muppet Treasure Island, not a single one of them was successful. And we're talking the likes of Lawnmower Man 2, Flipper, a remake of Diabolic, Sergeant Bilko, Barbed Wire, The Phantom, The Crow, City of Angels, and the Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies, to name all of the rest. Sure, one or two have that hipster appeal now, but since we were coming up at the end of the millennium, we wanted to see new things in movies. Because back in the 90s, we didn't care about movies based on old comic books or old TV shows. Yet Escape from LA was a film much demanded by the fans of Carpenter's works. It had been 16 years since the release of Escape from New York, and the movie and the character of Snake Plissken grew in such adoration that fans of the movie demanded a sequel to continue the adventures of their new hero. What Snake Plissken represented was a return to the lone wolf style of hero, like the lone gunfighters of the Western movies or the samurai of Japanese Chambara films, lone heroes who stood alone in the world against the system. Now, up to that point, Carpenter had never done a sequel before, or since. But once again, he was so ahead of his time. What he did with Escape from LA needs to be appreciated now in the light of our new modern remake reboot movie glut that we find ourselves in the midst of today. Who would have thought that such a film would have predicted this slate of unoriginality in filmmaking that would happen over 20 years later? In the meantime, Snake Plissken grew in adulation. He became the star of comic books that told prequel and sequel stories and furthered his adventures. He became an action figure. Hell, he even has his own pop figure. Characters in popular video games were based on him and pushed his status further. The fans' demand for a sequel adventure on the big screen reached the ears of the producers, and John Carpenter was courted to direct, but he said he would not do so without the star, Kurt Russell's, or his own approval of the script. Keep this in mind. It seems everything was falling into line to make the epic sequel that fans were expecting of their favorite action hero. When released, the film was met with such disdain not only from critics, but also from the very fans of Escape from LA that praised Carpenter. What we got instead was a retread of the first film, an almost beat-for-beat remake of the original. Does that sound familiar? There's nothing original here, we cried, yet that is the very point of any sequel. No matter who made it or what the genre is, sequels can only ever be copies of the first film. Indiana Jones will always seek out the sacred artifact that somehow kills the bad guys in the end. And that is the point Carpenter was making with The Great Escape from L.A. And he did this back in 1996. At the time of this recording was 25 years ago. In 2018, John Carpenter attended Escape Artists, a tribute to John Carpenter, which screened a double bill of Escape from New York and Escape from LA at the Eros Theater in Santa Monica, California. It was at this screening that John Carpenter revealed the process for writing Escape from LA. According to the website Ultimate Rabbit, at the post-screening Q&A, Carpenter discussed the writing of Escape from LA. While he had a larger budget and more time to make the film, Carpenter had a difficult time finding the right scenario for Pliskin to return. In the end, as the site reports, according to Carpenter himself, quote, "They solved their script problem by moving the action to Los Angeles, which was in a constant state of denial with all the earthquakes and natural disasters occurring there. They simply took the same scenario of the original movie and updated it to reflect the current state of the city while filming," unquote. Later on, an unused script laying out a brand new adventure based on the theme of escaping from Los Angeles was discovered, and a big internet hullabaloo was made because it differed from the version we got. And fans still complained that this unused script should have been the basis of Escape from LA. But the sequel did so poorly at the box office, there can never be the possibility of a third film, of a trilogy. Yet fans still clamor today for an Escape from Earth trequel. I'm happy that it never happened, because in a way I think we as the fans missed the entire point of the sequel. Look at how mad we get when something is rebooted or remade and it doesn't strictly adhere to the vision of the original, as if the original is going to vanish into thin air. Think of it this way, Escape from LA is to Escape from New York what The Force Awakens is to A New Hope, a long-delayed sequel produced to appeal to and capture the adoration of the fandom that surrounded the original by practically remaking the first film, with enough modern touches to make it stand apart. The main protagonist is from a desert planet reluctant to go on this adventure of saving the galaxy from a group of fascists, but this time she's a woman. Here Han Solo is still a smuggler on the Millennium Falcon, but now he is an old man, the mentor. There's a hidden secret file that must be found, but here it's a map. There is a death ray that destroys planets, but this time it is a planet itself. The mentor figure is killed off early, so now the new friend fights the lightsaber battle. There's a last-ditch attack on the death ray that culminates in a trench run that destroys it. But now you don't care about Poe Dameron at all. What fans of anything cannot admit is that we wanted more of the same, but somehow disguised as epic and cooler, labeled as new. Carpenter made the only sequel that his rebel sensibilities would allow. Something expected, masked as new, thumbing his nose at the producers and the overeager fans wanting more of the same. And he did this back in 1996, 25 years ago. It is a filmmaking sensibility that is lost on today's generation of filmmakers who try to promote some nouveau form of edgy, but is really just more fan appeasement. Films like The Force Awakens, the Marvel Formula movies, and unfortunately the new Evil Dead series, which locks poor Bruce Campbell forever in a role that he cannot grow as an artist. But kudos to him for leaning into it. And most egregiously, Fox's Deadpool. Let's face it, the first Deadpool movie only wishes it reached the satiric heights of the action genre that Escape from LA did. If its producers were as smart as Carpenter, they would have simply remade the first film nearly scene for scene with different villains that are just the same villains in different costumes. With extensive use of CGI, you don't even have to shoot the sequel. Just simply replace the heads and faces of secondary characters, villains, and mask the locations. Being meta means more than just talking into the camera as Ferris Bueller. It is the breaking the conceptual constructs of storytelling and visual constructs of filmmaking. I mean, how completely meta would it have been for producers to sell the Deadpool fandom the exact same film as the first? Now that would be taking the whole "it's so meta" concept to heights that not even the first Deadpool even attempted to make. The main reason I think this is that we lost our understanding of what satire is. Satire is using humor, exaggeration, ridicule, or irony to criticize society's stupidity or vices. Like the irony of selling the same movie to an audience that wanted more of the same from their favorite movie character. I think this is the real reason why we can't remake Blazing Saddles, you know? Not that you would want to. All I've heard is that we can't make Blazing Saddles in this PC cancel culture. Well, for one, cancel culture doesn't exist unless we want to talk about the colonization of cultures across the world and their cancellation. Second, we think that being able to say the N-word all we want in a movie is satire. It's not. It's racism. That's what Brooks was making fun of. The Western trope of a whitewashed West, by showing how racist it actually was, by how much they actually said the N-word, thus showing how racist we still are. We don't understand it anymore, I think. It is a fine line distinction that modern filmmakers don't understand. But then on the other hand, you can't make Nazis cuddly and call it satire. Looking at Escape from LA through this new lens, I find the satirical glee that John Carpenter had in bastardizing his own film to make a subtle point about the pointlessness of sequels. Through this new perspective, I find the genius of John Carpenter remains ahead of the game and way over the heads of us, the fans that adore him. My judgment is that Escape from LA is a satirical masterpiece. Thank you for joining me. And because of the YouTube guidelines, I have my microphone in frame, even though it's not plugged in. I have my cup of tea here that remains suspiciously empty. And I have my still trying to be young cap. My name is ERNEST M Whiteman III. I want to thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.
Online.
I present this
Cuba.
in the hope
779.
that our
7.
great nation
7.
may
9.
learn to live in peace.
I now render this final solution.
Welcome to your very own map to the stars. Sure, we all know the big one wiped out the entertainment industry here in LA, but the glamour and excitement